When I heard the news, I was sitting on the veranda, folding my old shawl. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where even the wind seems to pause. A bird was singing somewhere far away, and the tea on my table had already gone cold. That's when my daughter-in-law, Sarah, called. Her voice was gentle, a little unsure. "Amy," she said softly, "Aram got married yesterday." I thought I misheard her. "Yesterday?" I asked. "Yes," she said after a long pause. "It was a small ceremony. Just close friends. They didn't want to make it a big thing." For a moment, I couldn't find words. The world around me stayed still, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because that's what mothers do when they're trying not to break. "I see," I said quietly. "That's good. May God bless them both." Sarah didn't reply right away. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "He didn't want you to be upset, Amy. He said you prefer to stay home these days." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I said softly. "That's true. I get tired easily now." We said goodbye after a few polite words that meant nothing but filled the silence. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, holding the phone in my hands. My shawl had slipped to the floor. The tea had gone completely cold. And the bird that had been singing earlier was now quiet. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that hurts quietly, like a wound that's too deep to bleed. I looked around my small house. The same clock ticking on the wall. The same family photo on the shelf, taken years ago, when Aram was still in school. He had his arm around my shoulder and that mischievous smile I used to love. I whispered to the photo, "You could have told me, Beta. I would have come, even if no one wanted me there." The walls didn't answer, but I felt something shift inside me, a quiet emptiness spreading, slow and steady. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Sarah's voice in my head. "It was a small ceremony. He said you prefer to stay home." Maybe he was right. Maybe I had stayed home for too long. Maybe I had made myself invisible without realizing it. But still, a mother should know when her son is getting married. Even if she can't be there, she should at least be told before it happens. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I whispered a prayer. "God, give him happiness, even if it means I have to be forgotten." And in that quiet prayer, my story truly began. In the days that followed, I moved through my house like a shadow, quietly, carefully, without disturbing anything. The news had settled in, but my heart still hadn't. I found myself doing little things without meaning to. Setting an extra cup of tea on the tray. Folding a towel as if someone else would come to use it. Old habits are hard to let go of, especially the ones built from love. You see, Aram was my only son. My only child, actually. He was born late in my life, after years of prayers, tears, and promises whispered in the dark. When I held him for the first time, I remember saying, "Now I can die in peace." But as it turns out, motherhood doesn't end with birth. It begins there and never really stops. When he was little, Aram used to follow me everywhere. To the kitchen, to the garden, even to the market. He'd tug at my dupatta and say, "Amy, wait for me." He had the kind of smile that could erase tiredness from my bones. Every night, before bed, he'd ask for stories, not from books, but from my own life. "Tell me about when you were small," he'd say, eyes wide, ready to listen. And I would tell him everything, how I grew up in a small village, how I learned to cook from my mother, how the monsoon used to flood the streets and we'd play barefoot in the rain. He'd listen like it was magic, then fall asleep with his hand in mine. His father, Ahmed, was a quiet man. He loved us, but he wasn't the kind to show it in words. He worked long hours and came home tired, but every night, before sleeping, he'd peek into Aram's room and whisper a prayer over him. Life was simple then. We didn't have much money, but we had peace. We ate together, laughed together, and in the evenings, we'd sit outside under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. Those were the years I didn't know how lucky I was. Time has a way of moving faster than you expect. Before I knew it, Aram had grown tall, with a deeper voice and dreams too big for our small home. He got a scholarship, left for university, and promised to call every week. At first, he did. Every Sunday, he'd call and say, "Amy, guess what happened this week?" He'd talk about his classes, his new friends, the hostile food he hated. I'd listen to every word, smiling even when my heart ached from missing him. But slowly, the calls became shorter. Then less frequent. Then, sometimes, not at all. When I asked, he'd say, "Amy, I'm busy, you know how it is." And I did. Or at least, I told myself I did. I told myself it was normal, that all children grow up, move away, find their own lives. But knowing doesn't stop the heart from hurting. When Ahmed passed away, Aram came home for only 2 days. He looked thinner, tired, and older than his years. He hugged me and said, "Amy, I'm sorry. I couldn't come sooner." I told him it was all right, that his father would have understood. But inside, I wished he had stayed longer, just a few more days, so the silence A year later, I met Sarah, the woman he wanted to marry. She was polite, soft-spoken, and a little shy. I remember her hands trembled slightly when she brought me tea that first day. Aram looked happy beside her, really happy. And that was enough for me. I didn't care who she was, or where she came from. If she made my son smile like that, then she was already family. When they got married, the ceremony was small but beautiful. I sat in the front row, my heart full. Afterwards, I hugged her and said, "Welcome home, Beta." She smiled shyly and said, "Thank you, Amy." For a while, everything felt fine. They lived with me for the first few months. The house felt alive again. Laughter in the kitchen, footsteps in the hallway, the smell of fresh cooking. Evenings were filled with conversation and soft music. I thought, maybe this is how it's meant to be. But life, as always, began to change. Little things at first. Sarah started working from home. She preferred quiet, she said. Aram began coming home late, tired, distracted. Sometimes they'd eat in their room, saying they were busy or that they'd already eaten. I didn't mind, not at first. But slowly, I realized the house was getting quieter again. The laughter faded. The music stopped. And I began to spend more time in my own room, so they could have their space. When Sarah suggested they move out, just for convenience, she said, I nodded. That's all right, Beta. Young people need their privacy. Aram looked at me, unsure. Amy, will you be okay alone? I smiled and said, of course. I've been alone before. I know how to manage. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, and said, I'll come every weekend. And for a few weeks, he did. Then once a month. Then, sometimes, not at all. Even after they left, I kept their room just as it was. The bed neatly made, the curtains drawn back, a small photo of them on the bedside table. Sometimes, when I dusted the shelves, I'd find one of Sarah's hair clips or a pen Aram had left behind. I'd hold them for a moment, then put them back, as if they might return one day and need them. Life went on quietly. Days passed into months, months into years. Sarah would call sometimes, usually to check on me, and I was always grateful. But Aram's voice became something I only heard on holidays or special occasions. Even then, it was short and polite. Amy, how are you? I'm fine, Beta. How are you? Good, good. Work's busy. Then silence. I'd wait for him to say more, to ask how I was really doing, but he never did. And I didn't ask him either. Because mothers learn to live between the lines. Now, sitting here years later, I think back to all of it, how love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. Maybe Aram thought I didn't need him anymore. Maybe he thought he'd already given enough. But what children forget is that for a mother, love isn't measured in visits or phone calls. It's measured